Masamkele kunyaka u-2024 kwinkqubo yethu i-VOB Voice of the Bay. Igama lam nguPercy M. Lamani. Good evening and welcome to our first episode of 2024 on DSTV channel 260. That is your Voice of the Bay. My name is Percy M. Lamani. Tonight I am hosting two union panelists. One, Mr. Zanokolo Kama, who is the SALTU regional chairperson in the Western region, and Mr. Nathan Paulson, senior member of NAPTOSA. Tonight we'll be focusing on education of South Africa, especially the basic education and the education in the Eastern Cape. Guys, good evening and welcome to our show, our first episode in 2024. Mr. Gama, yes. Welcome to the VOB Voice of the Bay.
Thank you, Percy.
Mr. Nathan Paulson.
Percy, thank you for welcoming me, you and Buka Kaba TV.
Yes.
For sharing this opportunity,
yes,
to have a flashback on the results of 2023 of the matrics.
Fine. As we know that in 2023, when the results were announced last week by the Minister of Basic Education, Mamo Angie Motshekga, he told the nation that there is an improvement in the results of 2023 or the class of 2023. He stated that they have achieved 82.9%, and the Eastern Cape, our province, the province of legends, has scored 81.4%. What is your reaction for both pass rates of 82.9% and 81.4% for the Eastern Cape? Let's start with you, Mr. Nathan Paulson.
Good evening, viewers. Thank you, Percy, for welcoming myself from NAPTOSA and Zanokolo from SALTU, just to share this platform by looking back and have a flashback at basically on the matric results of 2023. Now, also Percy, on behalf of my mother body NAPTOSA, I'd also like to extend this to say thank you for inviting us.
Oh yes.
First of all, we would like to congratulate the matrics of 2023 with the achievement of 82.9%. The dedication of the learners and especially the teachers, which contributed to the improvement of this matric results. We also like to say thank you to Umalusi for accepting the 49 subjects, just the raw scores of the 49 subjects and the approval of the 2023 results, especially with this upward achievement. And we also like to compliment the Department of Basic Education and our provincial department for the successful completion of the final exams. Although it is fitting to congratulate the Department of Education, we must not forget that who are the people who are behind the matriculants. As NAPTOSA's view is that all accolades need to go to our teachers because they are the ones who are the drivers behind the matriculants. The teachers basically, under trying circumstances, they assisted these learners, especially afternoon classes. They had to work till 5 o'clock in the afternoons. On Saturdays, they had to offer the family time to come teach on the Saturday. And then school holidays, you have March, June, September. They had to offer these times for the learners. But not forgetting, the entire value chain of teachers depends basically from grade R to grade 12, and we must recognize all the teachers from grade R till grade 12 for their contribution for these matriculants to achieve these results for 2023, sorry.
Your comment on the Eastern Cape results?
Oh yes, I must really congratulate the Eastern Cape Department of Education for this upward trend. It is something that that is good for the province. We really improved from the days when we were seen as this province which everybody looked down upon. But now you can see there's a drastic upward movement in the results of the Eastern Cape, and Gauteng, Free State need to look out because we're on our way.
As, you have been in this position as number 6 for quite a long time.
But if you look at the trend is an upward movement. If you look at our results, come from 76% last year, moving up now in the 80s, which means that is a massive improvement for the province.
Okay. Satu?
Thank you, Mr. Lamani, and good evening, Nathiel from Naptosa. From SADTU, we want to greet the viewers. We also want to appreciate the opportunity given for us to come and reflect on the 2023 metric results. We believe, Percy, that this is an outcome of a long period of planning by the Department of Education and stability that has been there over time now in the department. First and foremost, it's not common for a Minister of Education to stay this long at the helm of the Department of Basic Education. We at times would say these are the fruits of maturity of the person who is at the helm of the department. But over and above that, it's a matter of collaboration with stakeholders. What we have seen over time, because stability is created by understanding between stakeholders, and that has happened. But what is also has been noticeable is the fact that the department has been able to identify the gaps in the system. You would notice lately that even the issue of appointment of educators has been decentralized to an extent that at least district directors, when they see a gap, they don't have to go and knock at provincial level or at national level to say, we have a gap in a particular subject. So, because what has been the case in the past was the fact that learners would be going to school for months unattended. But now we've got very little of that particular problem. But again, you must appreciate the work that is being done by stakeholders in education. There is a number of NGOs and NPOs that are now interested in education. You talk to your educators. In the past, you would have an educator who is not qualified to teach a subject, teaching that particular subject. But now there is a way of streamlining educators towards their own areas of expertise, which is much appreciated. The communities, it's unfortunate that you will have some pockets of violence in schools lately, but the communities have accepted that education is a societal matter. That is very much important and key. Over and above that, I think the department, through Section 58B of the South African Schools Act, has made it a point that there are standards that are set in terms of underperforming schools. So most of the schools don't want to fall into that category of being taken to accountability year in and year out because they don't perform. And that has been now replaced, that Section 58B. There is a D3 of 2023, which is a circular from government that says your school, if it's a primary school in languages and mathematics, it can't perform under 60%.
We are less than a minute before we go for a commercial ad break. Your reaction on 82.9?
That's a great, it's an A. If you can talk in terms of symbols. That's a great achievement by the South African government. I mean, that's why I am saying it talks about also the maturing of
Okay, let's leave it there for now. We'll talk more about all related matters in education. Let's go for a commercial ad break, and then we'll talk more about everything that has to do with education. Welcome back once again in your favorite talk show. That is your VOB, your first episode of 2024. Tonight we are discussing with the unions the state of education. This is what we are going to talk about now. The state of education, despite the matrix results that was announced by the Minister of Basic Education last week, whereby our matriculants scored 82.9%, but the question remains, is South African basic education in crisis? This is the question. Are we in a crisis in terms of education in South Africa? Yes, the class of 2023 has scored 82.9%.
Yes. According to me, we're in a deep crisis. First of all, why do we need to focus all our attention to matric results? I mean, if you look at the LACE program in schools, how much money is pumped into the LACE programs only for matriculants to pass? But we forget about the foundation of education. Where does it all need to start? It needs to start with the foundation phase where we need to implement a system where learners need to start from the foundation phase, then you work through the whole process. So when you come to grade 12, you don't need to worry about the grade 12 learner who had to sit for extra classes, who need to go weekends to school to be taught. I mean, that is totally unnecessary because the system, because of the system that is so broken, that is why so much money has been pumped into the matrics, just so that the results can be a reflection of what is happening in the education system. And that is not so. The 82% does not give a reflection on what is happening right at the bottom in the schools. So we are in a crisis. The other crisis is if we delve deep into this issue of the basic needs in schools. We sit at the moment with schools, prefabricated schools. From apartheid years, these schools are still there. You sit with the schools with no sports facilities. There's no halls. There's no Wi-Fi to schools. There's no computers. There's no labs. I mean, where are we going to? And we celebrate a matric farewell. We sit with learners who cannot attend the school in the Eastern Cape at the moment because of transport problems. We sit with the district department where the lights at the moment has been switched off by the municipality. I mean, that is a crisis. It tells me something is wrong and we need to look at what is going on in the system.
Satu, Mr. Kama, is South African basic education in crisis?
Percy, thank you once more. One would say yes and no. One, on the other side of the coin, where we were reflecting on results, one would be able to say, at least now, when I was talking to Secular D3 of 2023, there it now speaks to also intermediate and senior phase. You don't necessarily focus up there. And then another point is that we have now been trying to say your grade R teacher must be permanentized.
Yeah.
And we're winning in that particular space as well. Because at least now a number of grade R educators have salaries instead of stipends. So you are moving towards a particular direction. There are a number of structures and buildings in terms of schools. Last year already, 48 schools have been given to communities. And there are a number of other schools that are supposed to be built because it means there is a backlog that must be addressed by this government. Then we on that side, you mean we are at least there is something that is happening. On the side of threats, the issue of conditions of service, this issue of redeployment on an annual basis is a cause for instability in schools because you are now dealing with unhappy educators. In one way or the other, they become enemies of each other in the process of producing a better citizen. So you have that. The issue of business coming into schools, because a school is supposed to be a learning institution. Now there are external factors that are becoming a threat to school, because the businesses that are out there, they want to benefit from the education more than any other place, because there is a bigger budget that is in department. Now those people are threats to the department, and they are threats to the school's stability, because they also disturb the running of the schools through the SGPs and SMTs, because there would be people who are behind the instability in schools, who are in the township. This issue of crime and vandalism in schools is also one of the things that the department does not have is security for schools. Now, that is an issue that creates a crisis in schools. The budget cuts that are there. On an annual basis, there is a budget that has been put up. Soon before you get into the end of the financial year, money is taken away from the department by Treasury. So all those things, they create a crisis. Otherwise, if they could have been taken care of in a proper way, then we would not be in the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment.
So all in all, you are saying all what we have mentioned causes instability in our schools.
Yes.
Totally correct.
Totally.
But you are the one who came up with that suggestion of redeployment instead of retrenchment. Why now are you blaming the Department of Education?
Now, redeployment basically had to do, first of all, we need to relook at the whole redeployment system. We need to relook at what is the ratio of the schools, ratio teacher-learner. And that is a problem in the system at the moment, because the ratio is so high, and now because of the ratio so high, certain schools had to get rid of certain teachers and they need to move around. But with that...
But Mr. Mithel Paulson, you can't blame the department. You are the one who came up with this idea of redeployment instead of retrenchment.
Retrenchment is basic. It's difficult to retrench a teacher when there's a need in the schools.
The department wanted to retrench, and yet you came up with an idea of redeployment.
No,
as
the
union.
retrenchment means if you retrench a teacher, you take a teacher out of a system.
Yes.
And which means we are at the moment fighting for more teachers so that we have a better ratio in our schools. If you retrench, you take away teachers out of the system, and then we sit with a bigger problem. Because we sit with this
Mr.
issue
Kama, do you want to
of overcrowding.
say something around the issue of redeployment and retrenchment of the educators?
Yes. Percy, when we started with this issue of redeployment, it was to avoid retrenchment. You are correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And to secure the jobs of educators.
Correct.
But I can tell you that over time now, that's part of things that are creating instability. There's been systematic retrenchment.
How?
We are coming from 72,000 educators in the Eastern Cape. We are now at 54,000. And the department wanted to give us 49,000 educators in this province. Now, what it means, there is retrenchment that is taking place. What the other part of that is that they do not fill posts immediately. And that is part of retrenchment and cost saving. And in the process, again, you create another instability because there will be posts that are not filled. So there is retrenchment. Now, what we were raising in terms of this instability, we were saying you can declare your post on an annual basis, but keep the educators for 3 years in that particular school in case the school may, in one way or the other, grow. And because immediately you remove an educator, what happens? You must also cut streams.
Okay. Let's leave it there, and then we'll go for another commercial ad break, and then we'll continue with our issues at hand. Sibaleke sengasevengleni sibuye kwakhona kwinkqubo yethu i-VOB Voice of the Bay. Thank you. Sibuyile kakhona kwinkqubo yethu i-VOB Voice of the Bay. Once again, good evening and welcome to your Voice of the Bay, VOB, your favorite talk show on Channel 260. Guys, welcome once again. There is a report that says only 20% of public schools that are properly functional. Do you agree with that report? Mr. Nathan Paulson, NAPTOSA. 20%.
It depends who compiled that report. There is problems in the education system.
It's only out of 100%, only 20% that are properly functional.
That's what I'm saying. It depends who compiled that statistics to say only 20% is functional, because we need to.
Firstly, do you agree with that report?
I do not agree with that report, because I do not know who compiled that report, because it can be from different perspectives and how people perceive it. But with regard to that functionality, there is a problem in the system. There is this problem in the system, and the schools are trying their utmost best to be able to deliver the best education for our schools. At the moment, we can say at certain schools, like for instance, like Mr. Kama mentioned here, in terms of the underperformance of schools. And you'll find mostly those schools, you'll find it mostly in the rural areas, which is basically unreachable and where the resources is not even available. And take it, if you take an urban area where everything is accessible, and you take a rural area, and especially in the Eastern Cape, it's so inaccessible that it's difficult for those people to get the resources to be able to deliver what is needed in the education system. But we need to be careful when we make statements to say 20% of this education system is like that. And I do not agree with that. I don't know whether...
in your understanding, Mr. Nitel, in your understanding, how many schools, in terms of your estimation, how many schools do you think are functioning properly?
If you talk about functioning properly, it depends on quite a lot of things.
In terms of daily operations.
In daily operations, it depends on a lot of things, especially when you look at schools which have vacancies. There's a lot of processes which create these vacancies, and the schools cannot operate at that moment. But what I'm trying to say here is that around about 60% of the schools are functional. And when we talk about functional, you talk about there's teachers standing, the school operate, and the teachers are teaching the children.
So you are saying there are less problems in our schools, in our public schools?
In certain public schools.
Yeah.
In certain. We must be very careful when we don't need to generalize the whole system. Because there is problems. I do agree with that. But we do not need to generalize.
So all in all, you are saying 60% are...
That is my estimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are functioning properly. 60%.
They are functioning as a school, where there's an educator in the class and there's teaching and the school is functioning.
What does SADTU say about this 20% of properly functional schools?
Percy, one would not venture into percentages, because to me those are relative, and as Paulson has already indicated, they depend from what angle one is looking at education. Because if you talk education, you talk systems, and if you talk systems, you talk processes, then it means it talks resources. Now, if I'm sure it can't be a Department of Education that is giving that particular report. But if that person has given a percentage, and out of that has given the reasons why he or she is indicating such a percentage, then we may discuss that. But at the moment, one would say we can't be able to say now it's 50-50, it's 60-40 or whatever in terms of the functionality of schools. But the reality of the matter is that there are a number of challenges in education that we have already some of them highlighted. But on the other side, this issue of not resourcing schools, you can't expect them to be functional if they don't have the necessary tools to function. Starting from human resource and the LTSM and all those things. The budget that is allocated to schools, if a school has a little number of learners, it can't even buy a window pane if the numbers are low. It can't even repair a door. Then if you talk about that and you talk about vandalism of schools, then it means those schools are going to remain dysfunctional. Because the job of the school principal and the teachers now becomes caretakers and all of that. They are non-teaching staff that are not being employed for a long time. Now, if you talk dysfunctionality, you must take all those things into consideration. So without venturing into the percentages, yes, there are situations where you can say that school needs to be rescued. And at some point, there used to be administrators and all of that to ensure that a school does not necessarily get into a point where it does not function. At the moment, they make sure that the first thing that they do is to appoint a principal. Beyond that, they don't resource the very same principal. So it's a recipe for disaster. If you put a person and you don't give that person resources and you expect that person to turn things around. So there are cases where one can say schools are dysfunctional, some because of mismanagement of funds. Because of the very same businesses that I was talking about, people who get into schools on the basis of wanting to get business. Then people have some some agendas instead of focusing on the core business
of teaching,
of teaching and learning. Of teaching and learning.
Before we go for a commercial ad break, how does the dilapidated infrastructure affect the quality of learning?
That one, if you were to go around and look at schools that don't have proper infrastructure, they are underperforming. It's very clear they can't perform because nobody feels safe in that particular environment. Well, they don't know whether the building is going to fall at some particular point. They don't know because some of them don't have fences and criminals get through. Exactly. You know, they walk through the premises. And those things, instead of focusing on education, they make people to look around when are they going to be attacked.
Mr. Nathan Paulson.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, if you look at the schools at the moment, certain schools, the vandalism that the community is not even involved because they won't know exactly what is going in schools in the community, who the people who's vandalizing the schools. But they are the ones who also contribute to this problem of schools that underperform and that does not properly service, because the department will come today and they will present and they will provide to the schools with certain resources. A month later or a few weeks later, that things have been stolen by the community and nothing has been done. And the communities don't own the schools anymore. And that is one of the biggest problems that we sit with at the moment.
Do you invite the communities to form part of the programs
in your
schools?
Yeah, that is part of our job description. That is part of, we, as a school, you cannot operate without the community because schools is based in the community and they walk hand in hand with the community.
Okay. Sizabaleka kwakho siye ngasevenkileni sibuye kwakho sijongane nemicimbi echaphazela imfundo. Koko ke masifumane ivenkile. Ngokuba kunye nathi kwinkqubo yethu i-VOB Voice of the Bay, once again we value your support for watching our show VOB Voice of the Bay. We are still talking about the threats to our education, especially basic education. My studio guest is Mr. Zankolo Gama, who is the regional chairperson of South African Democratic Teachers Union in the Western region, and Mr. Nithel Paulson, who is the senior member of NAPTOSA. Guys, once again, welcome. We were talking about the crumbling infrastructure and its negative impact into our education. So far, we have seen that there are a number of schools that are built by the Department of Education, especially in the rural areas of former homeland Transkei. And yet we have seen that many of the schools are fenced, especially in our urban and the rural areas. Is that enough, Mr. Nathan Paulson, to protect this crumbling infrastructure? The issue of fencing.
The issue of fencing, I mean, fencing keeps everything. It keeps goats out of the schools. It keeps people walking through the schools away. And it creates the safe space for the learners to be able to operate. But like I said, and like my colleague has said here, the investment in securities at school is major, especially in these times that we live of crime in South Africa. We need to have people who will be able to look after our schools. And the department don't invest in that because they will, at the end of the day, they will basically protect the schools. And we can operate then functionally if we can operate, if they will employ the securities at school. Because that is imperative, especially in terms of in the urban areas as well, with gangsterism. Now there's a new tendency of people coming to schools, robbing teachers, threatening principals, threatening teachers, and there's no security. They just walk into the schools. With the fencing, they first have to jump over fence, but in any case, that don't prevent them. But we need people who will be able to help teachers to secure the school. Communities, they play an ultimate vital role in schooling, but the communities do not come present themselves. I mean, if you call meetings, you will see how many people come. I know of certain schools, when they call meetings nowadays, there's only, out of 1,000 people, there will only be 50 people in the meeting, which shows that the lack of urgency in the community, in the education of the children. And then that, it reflects basically on the school as well, because now it will influence the school's results as well. So fencing, yeah, it helps, but we need proper security at schools.
What are your thoughts as SADTU around the issue of safety in our schools?
Thank you once more, Percy. One, we can agree that fencing of schools is one of the deterrents. It reduces. It does not take away the risks. It reduces the risk because at the end of the day, if you have to have that fence without a gate that is manned by a human being, that fence is useless. Now, if you have that human being who is not properly armed and trained, again, that fence becomes useless. Because these criminals are getting through those fences, through the gate, into offices, and keep people as hostages. inside the school where nobody else can come in because the gate is closed, the fence is closed. So it's not enough. It's correct to have it as one of the deterrents, but you must make sure that you put more other ways of securing your people in schools. There's a lot now. There's human trafficking. Learners outside gates of schools are taken by cars and all of that. Nobody sees what is happening there. Now you are taking the very same teachers. They must watch the learners inside the class, inside the premises, and outside the gate. So there is a lot of work that is being put on teachers for security, which is supposed to be outsourced to other people to do that. Now, that's why you have teachers who have burned out, and teachers, you are unable to retain them in the system because they see the risks. They are insecure. In some areas, you even on their way to work, they must pay some money for security fees all over in our townships. You know, security for what? Now you must be secured against your own people, whom you are supposed to serve. So it's not enough per se, but we appreciate the fencing because at least you are able to control even your learners within a closed environment.
Yes, Nathan, I agree with you. You know, last year there was a meeting at the district office at St. Valentine's whereby these issues, especially the issue of safety and security in our schools, was discussed. And yet we have seen before we closed our schools last year that there are some people who were sent to the schools at least to protect the teachers and the learners. Even this year, when the schools were reopened, these people were also at the gates of the schools. Do you appreciate that, Mr. Kama? Because that thing is happening.
Yes, Percy, because like I say, that's also a deterrent. It's something that you cannot sustain. That thing is going to be there for some time. You know when you have volunteers, at some particular point they've got expectations. You must give them something to compensate them for what they are doing. With time, that will not be enough. You may give them something, and that something may not be enough. So it's not a long-term solution.
Did you raise that to the department as a trade union?
It has been raised with them. You can't raise that in public meetings. It has been raised with them, and they know that at this particular point, they are forced to use those people.
How long have you been talking about security with the department as trade unions?
It's a matter that has been on the agenda since the inception of unions because the security of schools to us is the security of members. It's our task and job to protect our own members. But beyond that, we are dealing with learners whom we are responsible for. So in as much as you want to protect your members, on the other side, you are responsible to these young people whom you are given responsibility for. So that thing has been there for quite some time.
Nathan? Any addition?
Yes, no, I agree with my colleague. If you look at what is so important, the security of a teacher is the ultimate for me. Because they are the ones who basically are the core in the community. For them to be secured, they will be able to now present themselves better. They will be able to provide a better education to them because they are more relaxed and more. Because I mean, if you an educator and you think anytime a person can walk into this class or the school and come have a gun against your head, demanding your phones and your laptops and things like that. I mean, Every day you will be teaching under duress and under stress, and which means security is vital. I believe the security for the teacher, the security for the learners is vital, and we need to do rapidly and do something about it.
Yes, sifikile ixesha kwakho lokuba siye ngasevenkileni sizokuhlabela mgama lenkqubo yethu i-VOB. Kanti ke xa sibuya evenkileni, we will look at the best solutions for lack of education in South Africa. Let's go for our last break. Sibuyile kakhona sinamkela kwinkqubo yethu i-VOB Voice of the Bay. This is our last segment. The time now is 10 minutes before 8 o'clock. I'm still with a guest from the teachers' trade unions. South African Democratic Teachers Union is represented by Mr. Zanotolo Kakama, and NAPTOSA is represented by Nethel Paulsen. Gentlemen, once again, for the last time, we say good evening. Let's look at the best solutions that can assist in the crisis that you have mentioned. What are the best solutions? I understand that there are a lot of meetings that you sit with the Department of Education. In some instances, in your discussions, you agree with the officials. In some instances, you don't agree with the officials. But what are the best solutions that can improve our education?
Percy, as NAPTOSA, we are worried about the emphasis that we basically place on the academically excellence of learners. There's one thing that we forget, that these learners are under pressure and under stress, but we forget about the three streams model. Learners, you get certain learners who cannot academically excel. So we need to look at the vocational, the occupational, and the technical streams in our schools.
So you are talking about the TVET colleges?
The TVET, I'm bringing in the TVET colleges. We need to link the TVET colleges to the schools. Higher education need to be linked to the schools so that the schools need to understand what is the needs outside. So the higher institution need to come to the schools and say, this is what we need to prepare our learners for. I mean, look at how many technical schools we have in the Eastern Cape. How many technical schools we have in Nelson Mandela Bay. And learners are under the impression that they need to be in the schooling system. And they forget that the TVET college gives them a best opportunity, especially the learners who's not academically so well off. And we need to look at the three streams model very, very intensely now. Also, if we look at other issues, Percy, is number one, schools. Drugs, one of the major issues in schools. And we need to look at how we're going to support these learners in a school system. Because they come, remember, the school is the reflection of the community. So these learners come into the schools selling drugs, using drugs, all that. But there's no support system for them in schools. So we need to look at the support systems for our learners in the schools as well. We need to look at the relationship between the governing bodies and principals and teachers. Because some of the times you'll find that governing bodies want to rule schools, forgetting about what is their role according to South African Schools Act. They forget about that role. And that is something that we need to seriously look at. And that is little things that we can do. From an education department, we can reduce the teacher ratio. We need to reduce so that there can be better teaching of our learners, because overcrowding is not going to work. Let us go to 4IR, the fourth industrial revolution. We are in a school in South Africa where schools don't even have computer labs. We are not even connected onto the internet. And how can learners be able to access national, international and global information if they don't have even access, because they cannot afford data if you know where they're coming from. Learners with barriers We need to look at those learners with barriers. We need to say in which direction those learners with barriers, we can channel those learners. And also, lastly, if I can mention the location. You'll find in the urban areas, the movement of the so-called location, learners from the so-called location into the previously advantaged schools. And now this other schools are being neglected. Now the question is, why is this learners then leaving the locations with the idea that there's better schooling on the other side of the road? And that thing we need to address, because it is unnecessary for parents every day to pocket 40 rand out of the budget to pay for a child to go with a bus to school, where there's a school right across the street.
Mr. Kam?
Thanks once more, Percy. You know what has happened in 2022 up to 2023. The department has been having a backlog of 1,279 people that have not been paid, that were supposed to have been paid. This issue of non-payments in the system needs to be dealt with and be got rid of, because it does not motivate people to love education, if you were to put it that way, so that they can be able to say whatever happens, they are with education. Now they become enemies of the very same thing that they must do. Then secondly is the whole issue of employment of the full complement of staff in schools. Full complement. You've got schools that don't have administrators. The principal has to be an administrator, a caretaker, a principal, and everything, a groundsman. If you go to offices of some of the principals, you will find that there are storerooms, because there are no places even to put the very resources that are there. So that's one. But the issue of care support for teaching and learning, there are a number of things that must be done, and one of them is the material support for the learners. Because you can't run away from the fact that most of the learners, even though they are able to go to school, they don't have proper uniform, and they don't have confidence. And in the process, they drop out of school. So for you to retain them, you must have such programs that are supposed to be in the ESSS section of the Department of Education, including this transport. Including this transport, because if you are talking about the schools in Walmart, in the farm schools, the 2 farm schools here, they did not have transport for 5 days. I don't know today, because it's the 6th day. Schools have opened, learners have been loitering around, waiting for transport to get to school. And the issue of not being consultative enough with communities when they have to close schools. And that's the issue that makes them to close schools without a plan. And after that, the schools get vandalized. You don't see the school anymore. But basically, let me also take this opportunity to say, you know what happened in one of the schools in Sweden. The school was robbed 2 times because of this issue of having no security. In KwaZakele, there was a principal who was missed by the bullet in his own office. And he was on leave for almost a year and a half. Meaning that school did not have a principal for that particular period. Now, the end of last year, all your schools in KwaZakele and Sweden were taken from the township to schools in the city. All of them, and their schools were closed. What happened thereafter? Those schools were vandalized immediately. They were left. They were vandalized when they were about to open at the beginning of this year. You know, so there is a lot that the department has to that it is not doing to service the very same schools. But I also wish Percy to take the opportunity to congratulate Isokhayisa in Motherwell.
Oh yes.
You remember Motherwell was taken as a project by the then president Thabo Mbeki. he had his own urban renewal project. And since then, the schools in Motherwell have come together to make sure. Now it's number one, that school, in the entire province, with 307 matriculants, 100%. So we have to congratulate such people, Mr. Nopote and his staff, for the work that they have done. And all the other schools, because most of the schools have improved tremendously. Most of the schools, they start to call in Tinaka, which has been one of the underperforming schools for a long time. For the first time, they are above 50, they're in 88%. So schools are doing very well with the mere gas resources that they are having. But they are able, at least, the work that they have been doing in the schools, the overtime that is not paid, that teachers and principals have to stay at school overnight because they have to protect the very same children who must pass the matric. So I'm taking that opportunity to appreciate the support that has been given to them by some of the community members. Because for them to be fed, sometimes they need money from the businesses.
Guys, there's a lot that we can say around education, but our enemy is time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you for making time to open this year with this with this important discussion around education. Thank you very much, Mr. Nathan Paulson from NAPTOSA, Mr. Zanukolo Gama, SADTU Western Regional Chairperson, Nkosi kakhulu siyabulela. Nenkubo yethu ke ngolo hlobo i-VOB Voice of the Bay ifikelele esiphelweni. Iba kunye nathi kwakho between 7 and 8 kwiveke zayo. Kanti ke impinda repeat kutsho ngomso phakathi kwecala emveni kwentsimbi yokuqala ukuya kwicala emveni kwentsimbi yesibini, 1:30 up until 2:30 busuku benzolo. Adios amigos, God bless.